People say parents love all their children equally. Mine didn't. My younger brother got my college fund, my grandfather's business, even the family home that was supposed to belong to both of us. When I asked my father why, he looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Your brother is the future of this family." Then he handed me a suitcase and told me to figure my own life out. I left with just $327 in my bank account. No family. No inheritance. No one who believed in me. 5 years later, the same parents who threw me away walked into my office asking for jobs. They had no idea the company they were begging to join belonged to the son they once called the family's biggest disappointment. My name is Ethan Carter. For 26 years, I believed that if I worked hard enough, my parents would finally be proud of me. I was wrong. In our house, love wasn't earned. It was assigned. And my younger brother, Ryan, had been chosen long before either of us understood what that meant. If Ryan forgot to clean his room, Mom laughed. He's still young. If I forgot once, Dad called me irresponsible. When Ryan got average grades, he received a brand new laptop. When I graduated at the top of my class, Dad simply nodded and asked, "Have you found a real job yet?" That was my life. No matter what I achieved, Ryan always came first. Grandpa William was the only person who treated me differently. Every Saturday, he invited me to his small workshop behind the family business. While everyone else spoiled Ryan, Grandpa taught me how to solve problems, how to treat people with respect, how to build something that lasts. One afternoon, he placed an old key in my hand and smiled. "Ethan, success isn't something people give you. It's something you build when nobody believes in you." At the time, I thought he was just giving advice. Years later, I realized he had been preparing me for a future he already saw coming. Everything changed after Grandpa passed away. The family gathered at the lawyer's office, expecting to hear his final wishes. Dad looked confident. Ryan couldn't stop smiling. He whispered, "Grandpa's business is finally ours." The attorney opened the file. The room fell silent. Then he read the first page. Dad's smile disappeared. Ryan looked confused. And my life was about to change forever. The attorney adjusted his glasses and said, "Before we discuss the inheritance, Mr. William Carter left one personal letter." Then he looked directly at me. "Ethan, this letter is for you." The entire room turned to stare at me. Ryan whispered, "Why would Grandpa write to him?" No one in that room was ready for what Grandpa had written. The attorney looked around the room. Then he opened Grandpa William's letter. His voice was calm, but every word felt heavy. "To my family. If you're hearing this letter, it means I'm no longer here to protect what I spent my life building." The room became silent. Ryan leaned back in his chair, smiling confidently. Dad folded his arms. Everyone expected Grandpa to leave the company to Ryan. After all, Ryan was the favorite. At least, that's what my parents believed. The attorney continued reading. "Success should never be inherited. It should be earned." Ryan frowned. Dad shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Then came the sentence that changed everything. "Until my grandchildren prove they can lead with honesty, the company will remain in a protected family trust." Ryan's smile disappeared. "What?" Dad immediately stood up. "There has to be another document." "There is," the attorney replied. "But first." He looked directly at me. "Mr. Carter asked me to give Ethan this key." He placed an old brass key on the table. It was the same key Grandpa had given me years ago. Only now, it came with a small envelope. Inside were just 7 handwritten words. Never trade your integrity for acceptance. I quietly folded the note and placed it in my pocket. The meeting ended. No one spoke to me. Outside the lawyer's office, Dad finally exploded. "This is ridiculous. He should have left the company to Ryan." Mom nodded. "He always wanted Ryan to take over." The attorney calmly corrected her. "No, Mrs. Carter. Mr. William changed his will 5 years ago." Dad looked stunned. 5 years? Yes. After he saw how differently his grandsons were being treated. The color drained from Dad's face. That night, Mom invited everyone to dinner. I thought, maybe Grandpa's letter had changed something. Maybe they finally understood. Instead, Dad placed a folder in front of Ryan. "What is this?" Ryan asked. Dad smiled proudly. "The paperwork. For the family house. And our investment accounts. I'm transferring everything into your name." I looked up in disbelief. "Dad. What about me?" He barely glanced at me. "You'll manage. You always do." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "The house belongs to both of your sons." Dad shook his head. "Ryan has bigger responsibilities. You'll make your own future." I laughed bitterly. "So, Grandpa tried to treat us equally. And you're undoing it in one night?" Mom sighed. "Don't make this difficult." Ryan looked at me with a smug smile. Looks like Mom and Dad finally made the right choice. Those words cut deeper than I expected. Not because of Ryan, but because my parents said nothing. They agreed. I slowly stood up. You know what hurts the most? It isn't losing the house. It isn't the money. It's realizing I've spent my entire life trying to earn love. That was never mine to earn. Dad looked away. Mom remained silent. No one stopped me as I walked toward the front door. Before leaving, I turned around one last time. "I hope Ryan gives you everything you're giving him today." Then, I walked out. I didn't know it then, but that would be the last night I ever lived in my parents' house. 3 days later, I packed one suitcase, bought a one-way bus ticket, and left town with just $327 in my bank account. As the bus pulled away, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Ryan. "Don't bother coming back." I looked out the window, deleted the message, and silently promised myself, the next time they see me, I'll be someone they never expected. The bus ride lasted 9 hours. 9 hours. To think about everything I'd lost. My family. My home. My inheritance. By the time I stepped off the bus in Chicago, I owned exactly 3 things. 1 suitcase, Grandpa's old brass key, and $327 in my checking account. That was all. No one was waiting for me. No family. No friends. No safety net. Just a city that didn't know my name. The first few months were brutal. During the day, I worked as a warehouse loader. At night, I delivered food until midnight. On weekends, I cleaned office buildings. Some nights, I slept only 4 hours. More than once, I wondered if Dad had been right. Maybe I wasn't good enough. Maybe Ryan really was the better son. Then I remembered Grandpa's words. Never trade your integrity for acceptance. Every time I wanted to quit, those words pulled me back. One rainy evening, while delivering food to a downtown office tower. I noticed employees rushing around in panic. A major presentation had crashed. Their operations manager had resigned that morning. Everyone looked overwhelmed. As I waited for the elevator, a woman accidentally dropped an entire folder of financial reports. Papers scattered across the marble floor. Without saying a word, I knelt down and helped organize them. As I sorted the pages, I noticed several mistakes. Duplicate invoices, incorrect inventory numbers, missing purchase orders. The woman looked surprised. "You understand these reports?" I nodded. "I studied business management." She smiled politely. "Then why are you delivering food?" I simply replied, "Because bills don't wait for dreams." She introduced herself. "I'm Emma Collins, Chief Operations Officer." Before leaving, she handed me her business card. "If you're telling the truth, come see me tomorrow." I stared at the card all night. The next morning, I walked into their headquarters wearing the only dress shirt I owned. It wasn't new, but it was clean. Emma interviewed me for nearly an hour. Then she pushed a spreadsheet across the table. "Find the mistake." I spent 10 minutes reviewing it. When I finished, I circled 6 accounting errors, 3 inventory problems, and 1 contract worth nearly $1.8 million that had been entered incorrectly. Emma didn't say a word. She simply smiled. "You start Monday." That job changed everything. For the first time, someone cared about my ability, not my last name. I worked harder than ever, arriving before everyone else, leaving after everyone else. Every promotion was earned, never requested. 3 years later, the struggling company had become one of Chicago's fastest-growing real estate firms. And on a cold Monday morning, Emma called me into the boardroom. Every executive was already waiting. She stood up, looked around the room, then smiled at me. "Congratulations, Ethan. As of today, you're our new Chief Executive Officer." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The boy who had left home with 1 suitcase was now leading a company worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Not because anyone gave me a chance, because I created one. That evening, as I stood alone in my new office overlooking the Chicago skyline, I opened Grandpa's old brass key one more time. Hidden inside the hollow handle was a tiny folded note I had never noticed before. It read, "One day, they won't recognize the man you become." I smiled. For the first time in years, I believed Grandpa had been right all along. The very next morning, my assistant knocked on my office door. "Ethan, there's a family waiting in the lobby." I looked up. "I don't have any appointments." She hesitated, then quietly said, "They said they're your parents, and they desperately need a job." My assistant stood quietly at the office door. "Ethan, they've been waiting for almost an hour." I slowly closed my laptop. For 5 years, I had imagined this moment. Sometimes I pictured myself turning them away. Sometimes I imagined pretending I didn't know them. But now that they were actually here, I felt nothing. No anger. No excitement. Just curiosity. I stood up. "Send them in." The office door opened. For a moment, none of us spoke. The people standing in front of me barely resembled the family I had left behind. Dad's expensive tailored suits were gone. His shoulders were slumped. Mom looked exhausted. The confident smile she always wore had disappeared. And Ryan, the brother who once believed the world belonged to him, Couldn't even meet my eyes. Time had changed all of us. But it had changed them the most. Dad slowly looked around my office. The floor-to-ceiling windows. The awards on the wall. The framed magazine cover featuring my company. My name engraved beside the title. Chief Executive Officer. His voice barely escaped. You built all of this? I nodded. Yes. Silence filled the room again. Mom finally spoke. Ethan. We heard about your company. I never imagined. She stopped herself. For the first time in my life. She had no words. Dad cleared his throat. We're not here to ask for money. I folded my hands. Then why are you here? Ryan finally answered. The business is gone. I looked at him. What happened? He swallowed hard. I thought I could double our profits. So I borrowed money. Then I borrowed more. I trusted the wrong investors. I signed contracts without reading them. And within 2 years, we lost everything. Dad quietly added. The bank took the warehouse. The equipment. The house. Everything. I remembered the night Dad transferred everything into Ryan's name. Ryan has bigger responsibilities. You'll manage. Back then, I had walked away with one suitcase. Today, they had nothing left to carry. Life had a strange way of balancing things. Dad looked directly at me. His eyes were full of regret. I was wrong. I thought giving Ryan everything would protect him. Instead, I made him believe success could be handed to him. He looked down at the floor. And I forced the son who deserved support to survive alone. It was the first honest thing I had ever heard him say. Ryan stepped forward. I owe you an apology. I hated you. I thought Grandpa loved you more. But now, I understand. He wasn't giving you more. He was teaching you more. I stayed silent. Some apologies deserved to be heard. Others had to be proven. Finally, Dad asked the question they had traveled hundreds of miles to ask. Ethan, we don't expect special treatment. But if there's any work, anything at all, we'll do it. The room became silent. 5 years earlier, they had told me to build my own future. Now, they were asking to become part of mine. I walked to the large window overlooking the city. For a long moment, I said nothing. Then I turned back toward them. I'll give each of you an opportunity. Hope returned to their faces. But understand this. You won't work for me because you're family. You'll work with everyone else. You'll start at the bottom. You'll earn every promotion. The same way I did. Dad nodded immediately. We accept. Mom quietly whispered. Thank you. Ryan lowered his head. I won't waste this chance. I picked up the phone. Emily. Please schedule 3 employee orientations. She smiled. Yes, Mr. Carter. As my family walked toward the door, Dad stopped. He looked back at me. Ethan. I spent years believing I had chosen the stronger son. A tear rolled down his face. I couldn't have been more wrong. The following Monday, their first day of work began. Everything went smoothly. Until security called my office. Mr. Carter. We've caught an employee attempting to access confidential company financial records. I frowned. Who was it? There was a brief pause. Then security answered. It's your brother. Ryan. The call from security caught me off guard. Mr. Carter. We've detained Ryan in the Executive Records Department. I frowned. Tell him to wait in my office. When I arrived, Ryan was sitting quietly with his head down. He didn't look angry. He looked ashamed. I closed the door behind me. So, were you trying to steal company information? Ryan immediately shook his head. No. Then explain. He reached into his pocket and placed a worn envelope on my desk. I wasn't looking for company files. I was looking for this. I stared at the envelope. My name was written across the front. Ethan Carter. The handwriting froze me in place. It belonged to Grandpa William. My heart skipped a beat. Where did you get this? Ryan lowered his eyes. I've had it for 5 years. The room fell silent. You've had Grandpa's letter. For 5 years? He nodded. The lawyer gave it to Dad after the funeral. He said it was meant for you. But Dad. Ryan couldn't finish the sentence. I already knew. Dad had hidden it. All these years. Grandpa's final words had never reached me. A few minutes later, Dad and Mom were standing in my office. I held up the unopened envelope. Is this true? Dad's face turned pale. He didn't deny it. I was afraid. Afraid of what? He took a deep breath. I was afraid that if you read Grandpa's letter, you'd leave us forever. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So you lied? For 5 years? Dad closed his eyes. I told myself, I'd give it to you later. But later never came. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. The first line brought tears to my eyes. My dear Ethan, if you're reading this, it means life has tested you more than it should have. I swallowed hard and continued. Never measure your worth by how people treat you. Some parents love imperfectly. That doesn't make you less deserving of love. My vision blurred. Grandpa had seen everything. Long before I did. The letter continued. One day, your family will realize the difference between giving someone everything and teaching someone everything. I slowly lowered the paper. No one in the room could hold back their tears. Dad whispered. He tried to warn me. I refused to listen. Ryan stepped forward. For the first time in his life. He wasn't acting like the golden child. He looked like a younger brother carrying years of guilt. I need to tell you something. I nodded. The business didn't fail because of bad luck. It failed because I believed I deserved success. Without earning it. I spent my whole life waiting for someone to rescue me. Just like Mom and Dad always did. He looked directly at me. You built your life. I wasted mine. I walked toward the window. The city lights stretched across the skyline. For years, I thought revenge would make me feel whole. But standing there, I realized something. Winning wasn't watching my family lose everything. Winning was becoming the man Grandpa always believed I could be. I turned back toward them. I can't change the past. And neither can you. But if this family is going to survive, it won't be because of forgiveness alone. It'll be because every one of us chooses to become better. Dad nodded. Mom quietly wiped away her tears. Ryan whispered, I will. The next morning, a black SUV pulled into the company parking lot. My assistant rushed into my office. Mr. Carter, there's an elderly attorney here. He says your grandfather left one final instruction that no one has ever seen. The attorney looked at me and said, This changes everything. The attorney stood quietly in my office. He was the same man who had handled Grandpa Williams' estate years ago. This time, he wasn't carrying one envelope. He was carrying a locked wooden box. He carefully placed it on my desk. Mr. Harper looked directly at me. Your grandfather instructed me to release this only when your family had lost everything, and finally accepted the truth. The room fell silent. Dad stared at the box. Mom nervously clasped her hands together. Ryan couldn't take his eyes off it. The attorney unlocked the box. Inside were 3 items. A leather journal, an old family photograph, and another handwritten letter. He handed the letter to me first. Across the front, Grandpa had written, "For Ethan, the grandson who earned what others expected to inherit." I slowly unfolded the letter. The first sentence made my heart race. If you're reading this, then you've already discovered that real wealth is never money. I continued reading. Real wealth is character. Money can be given. Character must be built. I looked up. Everyone in the room was listening. Next. The attorney opened Grandpa's leather journal. Inside were entries written over nearly 10 years. Every visit. Every family dinner. Every holiday. Grandpa had documented everything. One page caught Dad's attention immediately. It read, "Today Ethan worked beside me for 6 hours without being asked. Ryan never came." Another page. "My son keeps rewarding Ryan for potential, while expecting Ethan to survive without encouragement." Dad covered his face. He couldn't stop crying. I knew I was unfair. He whispered, "I never realized it was this bad." Mom slowly picked up the old family photograph. It showed Christmas morning from years ago. Ryan was opening expensive presents. I was sitting quietly in the corner, smiling anyway. On the back of the picture, Grandpa had written only one sentence. "One child is receiving gifts. The other is giving up childhood." Mom broke down completely. I never saw it. I was standing right there. And I never saw what we were doing. Ryan walked toward me. His voice shook. "Ethan, I spent my whole life believing I earned everything. But Grandpa was right. I inherited opportunities. You built yours." He held out a folded check. It wasn't a large amount. Just the savings from his first 6 months of honest work. "I know this doesn't fix anything, but I want to repay the money Mom and Dad spent on me that should have been yours." I pushed the check back. "I don't want your money. I want you to become someone Grandpa would be proud of." Ryan nodded. "I will." The attorney smiled gently. "There's one last instruction." He handed me a sealed document. It wasn't another will. It was a letter addressed to my parents. Dad opened it with trembling hands. Grandpa's final words filled the room. "If Ethan chooses to forgive you, never ask him to forget. Spend the rest of your lives becoming the parents he deserved from the beginning." No one spoke. No one needed to. The silence said everything. I looked at my family. 5 years earlier, I had left home believing I had lost everything. Now I understood. Leaving had saved me. Not because it made me successful. Because it gave me the chance to become the man Grandpa always believed I could be. I smiled softly. We can't rewrite our past. But we can decide what kind of family we become tomorrow. For the first time in years, Dad smiled through his tears. "So, will you let us try?" I nodded. Trying is where healing begins. 6 months later, our company hosted its annual leadership gala. More than 800 employees filled the ballroom. As I walked onto the stage to give the keynote speech, I noticed 3 familiar faces sitting in the front row. My parents. And Ryan. But I wasn't prepared for what Dad did next. He stood up. walked to the microphone, and in front of everyone said, "For years, I believed I knew which son would make me proud. I was wrong." 6 months later, our company hosted its annual leadership gala. More than 800 employees filled the grand ballroom. Executives, managers, new hires, community leaders, investors. It was the biggest event in the company's history. As CEO, I was scheduled to deliver the closing speech. But before I could step onto the stage, Dad quietly stood up. He walked toward the microphone. The room fell silent. Dad took a deep breath. His hands were shaking. Then he looked at the audience. "Good evening. Before Ethan speaks, there's something I need to say." I had never seen my father nervous. Not once in my life. Tonight, he looked like a completely different man. He looked directly at me, then back at the audience. "For years, I believed I knew which son would make me proud." He paused. A tear rolled down his face. I was wrong. The ballroom became completely silent. You see, I spent years rewarding the child who demanded everything, and ignoring the one who quietly earned everything. I confused comfort with love. I confused gifts with good parenting. And because of my choices, I almost lost my son forever. Mom slowly joined him on stage. She held his hand, then looked at the audience. People always ask how Ethan became successful. They think it was because he was lucky. She smiled through tears. No. He became successful because when we failed him, he refused to fail himself. I lowered my head. For years, those were the words I had wanted to hear. Now, they meant even more because they were finally true. Then something unexpected happened. Ryan stood up. He walked onto the stage beside our parents. There was no arrogance left. Only honesty. He faced the audience. "My name is Ryan Carter. And for most of my life, I believed I deserved everything. I was wrong. I didn't lose my brother because he hated me. I almost lost him because I never appreciated him." He turned toward me. "Ethan, you spent your childhood protecting me. I spent mine competing with you. I'm sorry." The audience applauded. Not because the apology erased the past, but because it was real. I walked onto the stage. Dad stepped aside and handed me the microphone. For a moment, I looked around the room. Then I smiled. You know, people think revenge means making someone suffer. I used to think that too. But I learned something much more important. I paused. Real revenge is refusing to become the person who hurt you. The ballroom fell silent again. I continued. My parents gave my brother every opportunity. They gave me every reason to quit. But those reasons became my motivation. If they had believed in me from the beginning, I might never have discovered how strong I could become. So today, I don't stand here as the forgotten son. I stand here as a grateful one. Because pain taught me what comfort never could. I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out Grandpa William's old brass key, the same key he had given me years ago. I held it up for everyone to see. My grandfather once told me, success isn't something people give you. It's something you build when nobody believes in you. I smiled. He was right. That evening, instead of ending the gala with fireworks, we announced something far more meaningful. The William Carter Scholarship Foundation, a program created to help students who had been overlooked, ignored, or underestimated. Every year, The foundation would pay for the education of young people whose families couldn't support their dreams. Above the entrance to the foundation, we placed a bronze plaque. It read, "Every child deserves to be believed in." 1 year later, the foundation had already changed hundreds of lives. One afternoon, a teenage boy approached me after receiving his scholarship. He asked quietly, "Mr. Carter, what if my family never believes in me?" I smiled, the same way Grandpa once smiled at me. Then I answered, "Someone else's failure to see your value never determines your future." He smiled and walked away with hope. As I watched him leave, I finally understood something. My greatest victory wasn't becoming richer than my family. It wasn't becoming CEO. It wasn't proving anyone wrong. It was breaking a cycle that could have continued for generations. Because the greatest revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming the person you needed when no one was there for you. And from that day forward, whenever people asked my parents, "Which son are you most proud of?" Dad would smile. Mom would squeeze his hand. And together they would answer, "We're proud of both of our sons." Not because one was perfect, but because both had finally learned what being a family truly meant.